history enthusiasts, and late-night learners. This is Vibing History, and I'm your guide to the echoes of ages past. Tonight, we plunge into an era that forged empires, revolutionized warfare, and laid the very groundwork for civilization as we know it. The Bronze Age, a time of incredible innovation, vast networks, and ultimately, a collapse so profound, its mysteries still baffle us. So, settle in, whether you're working, traveling, or drifting off to sleep. Let the ancient world unfold. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Now, let us begin our journey. For millennia, our ancestors, resourceful as they were, shaped their world with stone. From its simplest choppers to intricately flaked arrowheads, it was the age of rock, of raw earth given purpose by sheer human ingenuity. But then something shifted. A whisper of something new, something transformative, began to spread across the ancient landscape. It wasn't loud, not at first. It was a subtle glint, a resonance far softer than granite, yet far stronger than anything they had ever encountered. This, my friends, was the dawn of the Bronze Age. Imagine, for a moment, the world before bronze. Every tool, every weapon, every ornament, meticulously crafted from stone, bone, or wood. The limitations were profound. A stone axe, while effective, chipped and dulled. A wooden spear, though sharpened, lacked the penetrating power of something harder, denser. Then, someone, somewhere, made a discovery that would irrevocably alter the course of human history. They found that certain rocks, when heated just so, would yield a molten river of something malleable, something that could be cast into shapes utterly impossible with stone. This was copper, and its arrival marked the transition from the Neolithic, the New Stone Age, into what we call the Chalcolithic, or the Copperstone Age. But the true revolution, the forging of power that would reshape the ancient world, lay in an even more remarkable secret. Copper, while a marvel, was still relatively soft. It bent, it blunted. But if you combined it with something else, a rare and unassuming metal called tin, something almost magical happened. The resulting alloy, bronze, was harder, more durable, held a sharper edge, and could be remelted and reshaped countless times. It was, in essence, an ancient superpower, an unparalleled technological leap that would lay the foundations for empires, spark trade networks spanning continents, and ignite a period of innovation that still resonates in the echoes of our past. Now, it's crucial to understand that this wasn't a universal light switch flicking on at the same time for everyone. The Bronze Age, as an archaeological and anthropological term, defines a phase in the development of material culture. A civilization entered this age if they either produced bronze themselves, meaning they dug up copper, found that elusive tin, and then, through sheer experimentation and skill, mastered the art of smelting and alloying them together, or if they were clever enough to trade for it from those who did. Think of it like a new iPhone released today. Not everyone gets it at the same moment, but its impact eventually spreads. So, while the three-age system, Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, gives us a neat framework, the reality on the ground was far more complex, a patchwork quilt of technological advancement. For example, some of the earliest known bronze, specifically arsenical bronze, emerged in the Makop culture of the North Caucasus as early as the mid-4th millennium BC. This makes them some of the very first to truly grasp the potential of this new metal. Yet, other regions would take centuries, even millennia, to catch up. The sheer difficulty of obtaining tin was a significant factor. Unlike copper, which is relatively common in various parts of the world, tin is a much rarer commodity. It's found in comparatively few places, often in the form of cassiterite ore. This scarcity meant that for many societies, bronze remained a precious, almost mystical material. It wasn't something you'd casually leave lying around. It was recycled, hoarded, and often reserved for the elite. We see this, for example, in the magnificent Chinese ritual bronzes, where elaborate vessels were crafted for ceremonial purposes, while ordinary farmers likely continued to use their trusty stone tools for generations. The archaeological record often reflects this, as the very rarity of bronze meant that what little was made was keenly, almost religiously, recycled. Why was bronze so revolutionary compared to other metals? Well, let's consider iron. Iron is far more abundant in the Earth's crust than copper or tin. But here's the kicker. To smelt iron, you need incredibly high temperatures, around 1,250 degrees Celsius. Achieving that consistently with ancient technology was a monumental challenge. It remained largely out of reach for common use until much later, toward the end of the second millennium BC. Copper, on the other hand, has a more moderate melting point, around 1,085 degrees Celsius, and tin, a remarkably low 232 degrees Celsius. These temperatures were well within the capabilities of Neolithic pottery kilns, which, by 600 BC, were already capable of reaching at least 900 degrees Celsius. So, while iron was plentiful, the technology to master it simply wasn't there yet. Bronze offered an accessible path to a superior material. The systematic techniques involved in tin-bronze production were themselves a marvel of ancient engineering and scientific understanding. You had to mine the tin, or cassiterite, separately. Then you had to smelt it. Finally, you had to add this molten tin to hot, molten copper to create the alloy. This wasn't guesswork. It was a sophisticated process that required knowledge, skill, and perhaps a touch of ancient alchemy. This era wasn't just about a new material. It was about the dawn of extensive metalworking and, perhaps even more importantly, the development of vast and intricate trade networks that connected disparate cultures across incredible distances. In fact, some evidence even suggests that the earliest tin alloy bronze might predate what we conventionally think of as the Bronze Age. A 2013 report pointed to a tin-bronze foil from a Vinca culture site in Plotnik, Serbia, dated to the mid-5th millennium BC. While the dating of this specific artifact has been debated, it hints at the very early, almost accidental, discoveries that might have laid the groundwork for this monumental shift. Now, as bronze began to spread, it wasn't just a material. It was a catalyst for profound societal transformation. Let's turn our gaze to West Asia and the Near East, the regions that truly pioneered the Bronze Age, kicking off with the rise of the Mesopotamian civilization of Sumer in the mid-4th millennium BC. This wasn't just about stronger tools. It was about an entire package of innovation. These ancient Near Eastern cultures engaged in intensive, year-round agriculture, allowing for settled populations and a surplus of food. This surplus, in turn, supported specialization and the emergence of a whole new way of life. It was here, in the Fertile Crescent, that the very first practical writing systems emerged: the cuneiform script of Mesopotamia and the hieroglyphs of Egypt. This wasn't just about recording history. It was about administration, about law, about tracking resources. They invented the potter's wheel, a seemingly simple device that revolutionized pottery production. They developed centralized governments, often in the form of hereditary monarchies, creating a stable, if sometimes oppressive, social order. They formulated the earliest written law codes, like Hammurabi's, bringing a new sense of order and justice, or at least the idea of it, to their burgeoning societies. We see the rise of city-states, the nation-states, and eventually, vast empires. These societies embarked on truly advanced architectural projects. Think of the ziggurats and the pyramids, monuments to their power and their gods. They introduced complex social stratification, with ruling elites, priests, scribes, artisans, and, yes, the widespread practice of slavery. They developed sophisticated economic and civil administrations, and they engaged in organized warfare, medicine, and religion. It was in these melting pots of innovation that the foundations for astronomy, mathematics, and even astrology were laid. The Bronze Age wasn't just about metal. It was about the very fabric of civilization as we understand it. To help us navigate this intricate tapestry, archaeologists often divide the Near East Bronze Age into three broad periods: early, middle, and late. These are approximate dates, of course, and apply primarily to this region, not universally. We're talking about vast spans of time here. The early Bronze Age from roughly 3300 to 2100 BC, the Middle Bronze Age from 2100 to 1550 BC, and the Late Bronze Age from 1550 to 1200 BC, culminating in what we'll discuss later, the terrifying silence of the Bronze Age collapse. Let's take a brief tour, starting with Anatolia, the land that would later become Turkey. It was here, during the 18th century BC, that the mighty Hittite Empire was forged, centered in Hattusa. At its zenith in the 14th century BC, this empire stretched across central Anatolia into southwestern Syria and even parts of upper Mesopotamia. They were a formidable power, often clashing with the Egyptians, and their mastery of bronze weaponry was a key to their success. After 1180 BC, amidst a general upheaval in the Levant, a period shrouded in mystery, often linked to the enigmatic Sea Peoples, the Hittite kingdom fragmented into smaller Neo-Hittite city-states, some of which managed to cling to existence until the 8th century BC. Moving south, we encounter ancient Egypt, where the Bronze Age truly began in the Proto-Dynastic period, around 3150 BC. The archaic Early Bronze Age here, known as the Early Dynastic period, immediately followed the incredible unification of Lower and Upper Egypt around 3100 BC. This was a monumental achievement, bringing together two distinct regions under a single ruler, a god-king whose capital moved from Abydos to the iconic city of Memphis. Abydos, however, remained a major holy land in the south, a place of profound spiritual significance. It was during this early dynastic period that the hallmarks of ancient Egyptian civilization truly took shape. Their distinctive art, their monumental architecture, their complex religious beliefs. Memphis, during this early Bronze Age, wasn't just a capital. It was the largest city of its time, a bustling hub of power and innovation. This period seamlessly transitioned into what we know as the Old Kingdom, the 3rd millennium BC, a time when Egyptian civilization achieved its first continuous peak of complexity and achievement, marked by the construction of the Great Pyramids and a flourishing culture that remains awe-inspiring to this day. However, even the most stable empires experience periods of turmoil. The first intermediate period, often described as a dark period in Egyptian history, followed the end of the Old Kingdom, lasting about a century from 2181 to 2055 BC. Monumental evidence from this time is scarce, almost as if history itself took a breath. During this dynamic era, Egypt's rule was roughly divided between two centers of power, Heracleopolis in Lower Egypt and Thebes in Upper Egypt. These two kingdoms eventually clashed, and it was the Theban kings who ultimately conquered the north, reunifying Egypt under a single ruler during the latter part of the 11th dynasty, bringing us into the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom, spanning from 2055 to 1650 BC, was another period of flourishing. It was during this time that the Osiris funerary cult gained immense popularity, shaping the spiritual lives of ordinary Egyptians. The unified kingdom, initially thought to comprise the 11th and 12th dynasties, is now understood by historians to also include a significant portion of the 13th dynasty. But once again, the tides of history turned. The second intermediate period saw ancient Egypt fall into disarray for a second time, a turbulent era between the end of the Middle Kingdom and the beginning of the New Kingdom. This period is perhaps best known for the Hyksos, a group of foreign rulers whose reign comprised the 15th and 16th dynasties. They first appeared in Egypt during the 11th dynasty, gradually ascended to power in the 13th, and emerged from the second intermediate period in control of Avaris and the fertile Nile Delta. By the 15th dynasty, they held sway over Lower Egypt, until they were eventually expelled at the end of the 17th dynasty. And then, the New Kingdom of Egypt, also known as the Egyptian Empire, rose to prominence during the 16th to 11th centuries BC. This was Egypt's most prosperous time, the absolute zenith of its power, a period of pharaohs like Thutmose III, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and the formidable Ramses II. The later New Kingdom, comprising the 19th and 20th dynasties, is often referred to as the Ramesside period, named after the 11 pharaohs who proudly bore the name Ramses. This was an era of unprecedented imperial expansion, colossal building projects, and a cultural vibrancy that left an indelible mark on the world. Beyond the Nile Valley, the Bronze Age also touched Nubia, south of Egypt, beginning as early as 2300 BC. The Egyptians themselves introduced copper smelting to the Nubian city of Meroe around 2600 BC, and evidence of a furnace for bronze casting in Kerma has been dated to between 2300 and 1900 BC, demonstrating the widespread diffusion of this critical technology. Now, let's cast our gaze eastward to the Iranian plateau, where the ancient civilization of Elam flourished, located to the east of Mesopotamia. In the Middle Bronze Age, Elam was a collection of kingdoms centered in Anshan. Later, from the mid-2nd millennium BC, its heart shifted to Susa in the Khazestan lowlands. Elamite culture played a crucial role, influencing both the Gutian Empire and the later, iconic Achaemenid Persian dynasty that succeeded it. Further into Central Asia, we find the Oxus civilization, also known as the Bactria, Margiana archaeological complex, a fascinating Bronze Age culture dated roughly from 2300 to 1700 BC. Centered on the upper Amu Darya River, this culture developed a proto-urban society in the early Bronze Age, with important centers like Altan Deep, where wheel-turn pottery was crafted and even grapes were cultivated. The peak of this urban development occurred around 2300 BC, a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of these ancient Central Asian peoples. Evidence suggests that the BMAC had close international relations with the Indus Valley, the Iranian plateau, and possibly even indirectly with Mesopotamia, demonstrating the intricate web of connections forming across the ancient world. And then there's the Kali culture in southern Balochistan, contemporary with the Indus Valley civilization, around 2500 to 2000 BC. Their economy was agricultural, and the discovery of dams in several places points to a highly developed water management system, crucial for sustaining life in this arid region. The tantalizing possibility of a Giraffe culture, based on confiscated artifact from the 3rd millennium BC at Konar Sandal, further hints at the rich, still unfolding story of the Iranian plateau. Shifting back west to the Levant, that ancient crossroads between Anatolia, Egypt, and Mesopotamia, the Bronze Age chronology is often divided into early, old, and middle Syrian periods corresponding to the early, middle, and late Bronze Ages respectively. The Neo-Syria term is typically reserved for the early Iron Age. The Old Syrian period was dominated by powerful kingdoms like Eblaite, Nugur, and Mari. The Akkadians, that formidable Mesopotamian empire, conquered large swathes of the Levant, only to be followed by the Amorite kingdoms around 2000 to 1600 BC, which arose in places like Mari, Yemhad, and Assyria. From the 15th century BC onwards, the term Amuru often applied to the region stretching north of Canaan as far as Kadesh on the Orontes River. The ancient city of Ugarit on the Mediterranean coast had remarkable contact with Egypt as early as the reign of Pharaoh Senusreddai, 1971 to 1926 BC, with artifacts like a carnelian bead and later stelae and statuettes providing tangible links. From the 16th to the 13th century BC, Ugarit maintained constant contact with both Egypt and Cyprus, thriving as a key trading port. Further north, emerging around 1500 to 1300 BC, was Mitanni, a loosely organized but powerful state in northern Syria and southeast Anatolia. Founded by an Indo-Aryan ruling class overseeing a predominantly Hurrian population, Mitanni became a major regional power, initially rivaling Egypt. However, with the rise of the Hittite Empire, Mitanni and Egypt strategically allied to protect their mutual interests from the looming threat of Hittite domination. At its peak in the 14th century BC, Mitanni's influence radiated from its capital, Washu-Qani, which archaeologists have tentatively located on the headwaters of the Kaba River. But even mighty Mitanni eventually succumbed to the Hittites and later Assyrian attacks, ultimately being reduced to a province of the Middle Assyrian Empire. And of course, we cannot discuss the Levant without mentioning the Israelites, an ancient Semitic-speaking people who inhabited part of Canaan during the tribal and monarchic periods, roughly from the 15th to the 6th centuries BC. The name Israel itself first appears around 1209 BCE, right at the tail end of the Late Bronze Age and the very beginning of the Iron Age, immortalized on the Merneptah stele raised by the Egyptian pharaoh Merneptah. Contemporaneously, the Arameans, a northwest Semitic nomadic pastoral people, originated in what is now modern Syria during the Late Bronze and Early Iron Age. Large groups migrated into Mesopotamia, intermingling with the native Akkadian populations. The Arameans, unlike some of their neighbors, never formed a unified empire, instead establishing independent kingdoms across the Near East. After the Bronze Age collapse, their political influence was largely confined to Syro-Hittite states, which were eventually absorbed into the formidable Neo-Assyrian Empire by the 8th century BC. Finally, in Mesopotamia itself, the Bronze Age began around 3500 BC and ended with the Kassite period, from roughly 1500 to 1155 BC. Here, the usual early, middle, and late Bronze Age divisions are less commonly used, with archaeologists preferring a division based more on art and historical characteristics. The cities of the ancient Near East were truly immense for their time, often housing tens of thousands of people. Kish, Isin, Larsa, and Nippur flourished in the Middle Bronze Age, while Babylon, Kala, and Assur rose to prominence in the Late Bronze Age, boasting similarly large populations. The Akkadian Empire, from 2335 to 2154 BC, became the dominant power in the region, a testament to its military might and administrative prowess. After its eventual fall, the Sumerians experienced a renaissance with the Neo-Sumerian Empire. Assyria, with its old Assyrian Empire, circa 1800 to 1600 BC, became a regional power under the Amorite king Shamshiad I. The earliest mention of Babylon, then a small administrative town, appears on a tablet from the reign of Sargon of Akkad in the 23rd century BC. It was the Amorite dynasty that established the powerful city-state of Babylon in the 19th century BC, and over a century later, it briefly seized control of other city-states, forming the short-lived but impactful First Babylonian Empire during what is also known as the Old Babylonian period. Akkad, Assyria, and Babylonia all used the written East Semitic Akkadian language for official purposes and as a spoken tongue. By this time, the ancient Sumerian language was no longer spoken in daily life, but continued to be used for religious purposes in Assyria and Babylonia, persisting in this sacred role until the 1st century AD. The Akkadian and Sumerian traditions deeply influenced later Assyrian and Babylonian culture. Despite its cultural richness, Babylonia, unlike the more militarily powerful Assyria, was often founded by non-native Amorites and frequently ruled by other non-indigenous peoples like the Kassites, Arameans, and Chaldeans, as well as by its more powerful Assyrian neighbors. So, from the first glimmers of melted copper to the intricate alloy of bronze, we see a story of innovation, of trade, and of the fundamental forging of power that allowed these ancient civilizations to rise, to thrive, and to lay the very groundwork for the world that would follow. The sheer ingenuity and perseverance required to master this new material, to connect distant lands for its precious components, and to build societies of unprecedented complexity upon its foundation, is nothing short of breathtaking. It's a reminder that even in the deepest echoes of our past, the human spirit of discovery burns ever bright. Welcome back, history lovers, and those of you simply drifting off to the soothing hum of ancient tales. You're with Vibing History, and tonight we continue our journey, stepping further into the era that truly reshaped the very foundations of human existence. Last time, we laid the groundwork, understanding the fundamental shift that bronze brought to tools and warfare. Tonight, we delve deeper, much deeper into the specific sands of time, where empires rose and fell, pharaohs reigned, and the very dawn of organized civilization took hold in the crucible of the Near East. Imagine, if you will, the scent of baking bread mingling with the dust of construction, the murmur of 1,000 voices, the glint of newly fashioned metal under a harsh desert sun. This is the world we're entering, a world transformed by the simple yet revolutionary alloy of copper and tin. The Bronze Age, as we define it, isn't a neat, uniform global phenomenon. Oh no, history is rarely that tidy. It's an archaeological and anthropological term, a marker for a pivotal phase in the material culture of ancient societies across Asia, the Near East, and Europe. A civilization earned its Bronze Age badge if it was either skillfully forging bronze from its own mined copper and tin, or if it was clever enough to trade for it from those who did. It's the middle child, if you will, nestled between the Stone Age that came before and the Iron Age that would eventually follow. Now, before the true Bronze Age, there was this interesting transition period, what we call the Chalcolithic or Copper-Stone Age. Think of it as humanity's awkward teenage years, experimenting with copper before fully committing to the more robust bronze. And these developments, these leaps in technology, they didn't happen everywhere at once. Each region, each ancient culture, had its own unique timetable, its own rhythm of progress. One of the most profound innovations of the Bronze Age, perhaps even more significant than the metal itself, was the birth of writing. Think about that for a moment. For millennia, human knowledge, stories, laws, they were all passed down orally, vulnerable to the whims of memory, interpretation, and time. But then, in the Bronze Age, in the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia and the Grand River Valley of Egypt, something miraculous happened. Cultures in Mesopotamia, with their intricate cuneiform script, and the Egyptians, with their majestic hieroglyphs, developed the earliest practical writing systems. Suddenly, words could be etched into clay, carved into stone, painted onto papyrus, enduring beyond the lifespan of any single human. This wasn't just a communication tool. It was the bedrock of complex administration, law, religion, and the very concept of recorded history. Now, across the vast stretches of the Americas, a different chronological system unfolded, one without a distinct Bronze Age, even though some cultures there certainly mastered the art of smelting copper and even bronze. And on the Australian continent, metalworking simply didn't exist before European settlers arrived in the late 18th century. It just goes to show you how varied the human journey can be. Throughout much of the Bronze Age, bronze itself remained a precious commodity. Why? Because tin, that crucial alloying element, was surprisingly rare. Copper, yes, that was common enough. But tin? It occurred in relatively few places, making it a valuable resource, a driver of early trade networks. So, in many societies, bronze wasn't for everyone. It was often reserved for the elite, for powerful weapons, or for exquisite art, like the stunning ritual bronzes of ancient China. Ordinary farmers, for the most part, still relied on their trusty stone tools. But this is where history gets tricky to interpret. Because bronze was so valuable, it was also keenly recycled, melted down, and reformed, meaning much of what was once abundant might have simply vanished into new forms. The technological advantage that bronze offered was undeniable. It was harder, more durable than any other metal readily available at the time. Iron, while abundant in the earth, demanded much higher temperatures for smelting, around 1250 degrees Celsius, far beyond what early kilns could achieve. Its stubbornness to work with also made it a late bloomer in the metallurgical world. But tin, its melting point was a mere 232 degrees Celsius. Copper, a manageable 1085 degrees. Both were well within the capabilities of Neolithic pottery kilns, some of which, dating back as far as 6000 BC, could reach over 900 degrees. This widespread use of bronze, this defining characteristic of the age, didn't, as I mentioned, appear simultaneously across the globe. Evidence suggests an independent discovery of arsenical bronze in the Makop culture of the North Caucasus as early as the mid-4th millennium BC, making them the earliest known bronze producers. But the more complex tin-bronze technology that required a whole other level of sophistication, mining tin or smelting it separately, and then carefully adding it to molten copper to create that superior alloy. The Bronze Age, then, was not just about a metal. It was about the complex dance of systematic techniques, extensive trade networks, and the relentless march of human ingenuity. There's even a report from 2013 suggesting the earliest tin alloy bronze was a foil from a Vinca culture site in Serbia, dating to the mid-5th millennium BC, though that particular dating is still debated among scholars. But now, let us turn our gaze to the true heart of this epoch, to where the Bronze Age truly ignited, giving birth to what we now recognize as civilization itself, the Near East. West Asia and the Near East. This was the crucible, the birthplace, the very first region to embrace the Bronze Age, ushered in by the meteoric rise of the Mesopotamian civilization of Sumer in the mid-4th millennium BC. Here, the landscape was a canvas for intensive, year-round agriculture, fed by mighty rivers. Here, the first writing systems, cuneiform and hieroglyphs, emerged. Here, the potters will spun into existence, revolutionizing production. Here, centralized governments, often hereditary monarchies, took root. Written law codes, city-states, nation-states, even sprawling empires, all were conceived in these fertile lands. Advanced architectural projects, social stratification, complex economic and civil administration, the practice of slavery, organized warfare, rudimentary medicine, and formalized religions. These were the hallmarks of these groundbreaking societies. And it was here that the very foundations for astronomy, mathematics, and astrology were laid. This was not just a period of metal. It was a period of monumental human achievement, a rapid acceleration of complexity that would echo through all subsequent history. The Bronze Age in the Near East is typically divided into 3 broad periods: early, middle, and late. But remember, these dates and phases are specifically for this region. They don't apply universally. And even within the Near East, some archaeologists propose a high chronology, pushing certain periods back even further by several centuries, based on meticulous analysis of materials found in cities like Hazor, Jericho, and Beit Shean in the southern Levant. Let's sketch out this timeline for a moment, to give you a sense of its vastness. The Early Bronze Age, or EBA, stretches from around 3300 to 2100 BC. This period saw its own internal subdivisions, from EBA I to EBA IV, each marking subtle shifts and developments in these burgeoning societies. Then came the Middle Bronze Age, or MBA, sometimes referred to as the Intermediate Bronze Age, running from approximately 2100 to 1550 BC. Again, this era is further nuanced with periods like MBA I, IIA, IIB, and IIC, each representing significant transformations. And finally, the Late Bronze Age, or LBA, from 1550 to 1200 BC, an era that, as we'll explore in a later segment, would culminate in one of history's most enigmatic and terrifying collapses. This too had its own stages, LBA I, IIA, and IIB, the latter period witnessing that dramatic and mysterious unraveling. So, let's begin our deeper dive, moving across the ancient Near East region by region. First, Anatolia, the landmass that is modern-day Turkey. Here, during the 18th century BC, a formidable power arose, the Hittite Empire. Its capital was Hattusa, nestled in northern Anatolia. At its zenith, in the 14th century BC, the Hittite kingdom was a force to be reckoned with, encompassing not just central Anatolia, but also southwestern Syria, reaching as far south as the ancient city of Ugarit and extending into upper Mesopotamia. Imagine the might and influence of such an empire, a true juggernaut of the ancient world. But like all empires, even the mightiest, the Hittites eventually faced their own twilight. After 1180 BC, amidst a maelstrom of regional turmoil, a chaos often attributed to the sudden and devastating arrival of the enigmatic Sea Peoples, the Hittite kingdom fragmented. It shattered into numerous independent Neo-Hittite city-states, some of which, remarkably, managed to cling to existence well into the 8th century BC, echoes of a grander past. To the west of the Hittite heartland lay Arzawa, a region in western Anatolia that, during the second half of the second millennium BC, likely stretched along a belt from the Turkish Lakes region to the Aegean coast. Arzawa was a neighbor to the Middle and New Hittite kingdoms, sometimes a fierce rival, sometimes a subservient vassal, always navigating the complex geopolitical currents of the day. And even further back, around 1400 BC, we find mention of the Asua League, a confederation of states in western Anatolia that was ultimately subdued by the Hittites under their formidable ruler, Tudhalia I Arzawa. In some periods, may even have been referred to as Asua, or at least bordered it closely. The names blur in the shifting sands of ancient history. Now, let's turn our attention to the land of the Nile, ancient Egypt, where the Bronze Age unfolded in a particularly majestic and enduring fashion. In ancient Egypt, the Bronze Age commenced in the Proto-Dynastic period, around 3150 BC. This was a monumental era, a time of profound transformation. The archaic Early Bronze Age of Egypt, known as the Early Dynastic period, immediately followed the pivotal unification of Lower and Upper Egypt, around 3100 BC. This period generally encompasses the First and Second Dynasties, lasting until approximately 2686 BC, which marked the beginning of the glorious Old Kingdom. With the First Dynasty, the heart of power shifted from Abydos, an ancient cult center, to Memphis, a new capital that symbolized the unified realm ruled by an Egyptian god-king. Abydos, however, retained its profound religious significance as a major holy land in the south. It was during this early dynastic period that the very hallmarks of ancient Egyptian civilization, its distinctive art, its monumental architecture, its intricate religion, began to truly take shape. And Memphis, in those early Bronze Age centuries, was nothing less than the largest city of its time, a bustling metropolis, a center of power and innovation. The Old Kingdom, emerging from the early dynastic period, represents the apex of Egyptian civilization in the 3rd millennium BC. This was the era when Egyptian society attained its first sustained peak of complexity and achievement, the first of 3 magnificent kingdom periods that would define the high points of civilization in the Lower Nile Valley. The others, of course, being the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. Imagine the pyramids rising, not as ancient ruins, but as gleaming testaments to unparalleled organization and belief. But even in Egypt, the wheel of history turned. The first intermediate period, often painted as a dark period in ancient Egyptian history, cast its shadow for about 100 years after the Old Kingdom's decline, from roughly 2181 to 2055 BC. Monumental evidence from this time is scarce, particularly from its earlier years. It was a dynamic, turbulent era, with the rule of Egypt loosely fractured between 2 main centers, Heracleopolis in Lower Egypt and Thebes in Upper Egypt. These 2 rival kingdoms eventually clashed, and it was the Theban kings who ultimately triumphed, conquering the north and reunifying Egypt under a single ruler during the latter part of the 11th dynasty. Moving south, beyond the cataracts of the Nile, we find Nubia. Here, the Bronze Age began as early as 2300 BC. The Egyptians, ever keen on resources, introduced copper smelting to the Nubian city of Meroe, in present-day Sudan, around 2600 BC, and a furnace for bronze casting. A testament to this transfer of technology has been discovered in Kerma, dated to between 2300 and 1900 BC. The influence of Egyptian power and innovation extended far into the south, bringing with it the transformative power of bronze. Now, let's move into the Middle Bronze Age in Egypt. This period, spanning from 2055 to 1650 BC, witnessed significant cultural and religious shifts. It was during this time that the Osiris funerary cult, with its promise of an afterlife and resurrection, rose to dominate popular ancient Egyptian religion, becoming a central pillar of belief. The Middle Kingdom itself comprised two distinct phases: the 11th dynasty, which ruled from Thebes, and the 12th and 13th dynasties, whose power was centered around El-Lisht. Historically, the unified kingdom was considered to encompass the 11th and 12th dynasties, but modern historians now recognize that a significant portion of the 13th dynasty also belonged to this vibrant Middle Kingdom. But just as unity was achieved, it was once again lost. The Second Intermediate Period saw ancient Egypt descend into disarray for a second time, a turbulent interlude between the end of the Middle Kingdom and the dawn of the New Kingdom. This period is perhaps best known for the Hyksos, a foreign ruling group whose reign comprised the 15th and 16th dynasties. The Hyksos first appeared in Egypt during the 11th dynasty, gradually consolidated their power during the 13th dynasty, and emerged from the Second Intermediate Period in control of Avaris and the strategically vital Nile Delta. By the 15th dynasty, they held sway over Lower Egypt, a testament to their military prowess and political cunning. However, their reign was not to last. They were eventually expelled at the close of the 17th dynasty, paving the way for a resurgence of native Egyptian rule. And then, the pinnacle, the New Kingdom of Egypt, often referred to as the Egyptian Empire, a period of unparalleled power and prosperity, stretching from the 16th to the 11th centuries BC. This was Egypt's golden age, the absolute zenith of its influence and might. It followed the Second Intermediate Period and would eventually be succeeded by the Third Intermediate Period. The later New Kingdom, encompassing the 19th and 20th dynasties, from 1292 to 1069 BC, is famously known as the Ramesside period, named after the 11 pharaohs who proudly adopted the legendary name of Ramesses. Think of Ramesses the Great, building colossal temples, battling the Hittites, leaving an indelible mark on history. This was the era of epic tales, of grand monuments, and of an empire that dominated the ancient world. Let us now shift our gaze eastward to the Iranian Plateau, a region brimming with its own distinct Bronze Age civilizations. Elam, an ancient pre-Iranian civilization, flourished to the east of Mesopotamia. During the Middle Bronze Age, Elam comprised powerful kingdoms centered on the Iranian plateau, specifically in Anshan. However, from the mid-2nd millennium BC onwards, Elam's focus shifted, and its power became primarily centered in Susa, located in the lower Khazestan lowlands. Elamite culture, with its unique artistic styles and complex social structures, played a crucial, albeit often overlooked, role in shaping both the Gutian Empire and the subsequent Iranian Achaemenid dynasty, leaving a profound legacy in its wake. Further to the north and east, in Central Asia, we encounter the enigmatic Oxus civilization, or as archaeologists more formally call it, the Bactria, Margiana Archaeological Complex, BMAC. This Bronze Age culture, flourishing from roughly 2300 to 1700 BC, was centered on the upper Amu Darya, also known as the Oxus River. In the early Bronze Age, the oases cultures of Kapet Dag and Altan Deep developed into a sophisticated proto-urban society. Altan Deep, in particular, became a major hub, its wheel-turned pottery and cultivated grapes painting a picture of a settled, agricultural existence. The height of this urban development was reached in the Middle Bronze Age, around 2300 BC, an era defined by the distinctive BMAC culture, a rich and complex civilization that traded extensively and connected distant lands. And down in southern Balochistan, a region known as Jidroja, we find the Kali culture, which around 2500 to 2000 BC shared remarkable similarities with the Grand Indus Valley civilization. Their economy was agricultural, and intriguing evidence of sophisticated water management systems, including dams, has been discovered, showcasing their advanced understanding of their environment. More recently, the site of Konar Sandal has captured the imagination of scholars, associated with the hypothesized giraffe culture, a fascinating 3rd millennium BC culture whose existence has been largely pieced together from a collection of artifacts confiscated in 2001. Imagine a lost civilization brought to light by illicit trade, now revealing its secrets to the world. Next, we journey to the Levant, a crossroads of ancient civilizations, a land of shifting empires and constant interaction. In modern scholarship, the chronology of the Bronze Age Levant is organized into distinct periods: Early Syrian or Proto-Syrian, corresponding to the Early Bronze Age; Old Syrian, aligning with the Middle Bronze Age; and Middle Syrian, which corresponds to the Late Bronze Age. The term Neo-Syria, by contrast, is reserved for the Early Iron Age, marking a new chapter in this region's rich history. The Old Syrian period was a tapestry woven with the threads of powerful kingdoms: the Eblaite First Kingdom, Nugur, and the Mariote Second Kingdom, each vying for influence and control. Then, the formidable Akkadians swept through, conquering vast stretches of the Levant, leaving their indelible mark. They were followed by the Amorite kingdoms, which rose to prominence around 2000 to 1600 BC, establishing powerful city-states in Mari, Yemhad, Katna, and Assyria. From the 15th century BC onwards, the term Amuru was generally applied to the region stretching north of Canaan, reaching as far as Kadesh on the Orontes River, a testament to the enduring presence of these Semitic-speaking peoples. The ancient city of Ugarit, a crucial trading hub on the Mediterranean coast, maintained remarkably early connections with Egypt. The earliest known contact, and thus a crucial dating point for Ugaritic civilization, comes from a carnelian bead bearing the name of the Middle Kingdom pharaoh Senusret, whose reign is dated to 1971 to 1926 BC. Further evidence, including a stela and a statuette of Egyptian pharaohs Senusret III and Amenemhet III, has also been unearthed, though precisely when these objects arrived in Ugarit remains somewhat unclear. The famous Amarna letters, a trove of diplomatic correspondence from around 1350 BC, contain messages from Ugarit penned by kings like Amitamru I and Nikmadu II, and even his queen, showcasing the intricate diplomatic web of the Late Bronze Age. From the 16th to the 13th century BC, Ugarit remained a vital link in this network, in constant contact with both Egypt and the island of Cyprus, known then as Alashia. North of Ugarit, a fascinating state known as Mitanni emerged, a loosely organized power in northern Syria and southeast Anatolia, flourishing from roughly 1500 to 1300 BC. Mitanni was founded by an Indo-Aryan ruling class, who governed a population predominantly composed of Hurrians. This unique blend of cultures created a formidable regional power, especially after the Hittite destruction of Kassite Babylon created a power vacuum in Mesopotamia. Initially, Mitanni's primary rival was Egypt under the powerful Thutmosids. However, as the Hittite Empire began to assert its dominance, Mitanni and Egypt, in a pragmatic alliance, joined forces to protect their mutual interests from the looming threat of Hittite expansion. At the height of its power during the 14th century BC, Mitanni's influence stretched wide, with outposts centered around its capital, Washukani, which archaeologists believe was located near the headwaters of the Kaba River. Ultimately, though, Mitanni succumbed to the relentless pressures of both Hittite and later Assyrian attacks, eventually being reduced to a mere province of the Middle Assyrian Empire, its independence lost to the tides of history. The Israelites, an ancient Semitic-speaking people, inhabited a crucial part of Canaan during the tribal and monarchic periods, from the 15th to the 6th centuries BC, and continued to live in the region in smaller numbers even after the monarchy's fall. The name Israel itself first appears around 1209 BCE, at the very cusp of the Late Bronze Age and the dawn of the Iron Age, proudly inscribed on the Merneptah stele, raised by the Egyptian pharaoh Merneptah. This monumental inscription provides one of the earliest extra-biblical references to this enduring people. And then we have the Arameans, a northwest Semitic nomadic pastoral people who originated in what is now modern Syria, known biblically as Aram, during the Late Bronze and Early Iron Age. Large groups of Arameans migrated into Mesopotamia, where they intermingled with the native Akkadian-speaking populations of Assyria and Babylonia. Unlike some of their contemporaries, the Arameans never forged a unified empire. Instead, they were organized into independent kingdoms scattered across the Near East. After the dramatic Bronze Age collapse, their political influence was largely confined to a series of Syro-Hittite states, which, in time, were completely absorbed into the formidable Neo-Assyrian Empire by the 8th century BC, their distinct identity gradually subsumed into a larger power. Finally, we arrive at Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the very cradle of civilization itself. The Mesopotamian Bronze Age commenced around 3500 BC and extended through the Kassite period, roughly from 1500 to 1155 BC. Here, the usual tripartite division of early, middle, and late Bronze Age isn't typically used. Instead, archaeologists and historians prefer a division based more on the distinct characteristics of its art and historical periods, reflecting the unique cultural evolution of this region. The cities of the ancient Near East were truly vast for their time, often housing tens of thousands of people. Imagine the bustling markets, the towering ziggurats, the intricate network of canals feeding the land. Kish, Isin, Larsa, and Nippur were major centers in the Middle Bronze Age, while Babylon, Kala, and Assur rose to prominence in the Late Bronze Age, all boasting substantial populations and complex social structures. The Akkadian Empire, flourishing from 2335 to 2154 BC, emerged as the dominant power in the region, a testament to its military and administrative prowess. After its eventual fall, the Sumerians experienced a remarkable resurgence, a renaissance of their own, with the Neo-Sumerian Empire. Assyria, with its old Assyrian Empire from approximately 1800 to 1600 BC, also became a regional power under the ambitious Amorite king Shamshi-Adad. The earliest mention of Babylon, then a relatively small administrative town, surprisingly appears on a tablet from the reign of Sargon of Akkad in the 23rd century BC. It was the Amorite dynasty that later established the city-state of Babylon in the 19th century BC, and just over a century later, it briefly seized control of other city-states, forging the short-lived but impactful First Babylonian Empire during what is also known as the Old Babylonian period. Akkad, Assyria, and Babylonia all utilized the East Semitic Akkadian language for official purposes and as a spoken tongue. By this time, the ancient Sumerian language, though no longer spoken in daily life, still held immense religious significance in Assyria and Babylonia, a sacred tongue that would continue to be used in ritual until the 1st century AD. The rich Akkadian and Sumerian traditions played a profound role in shaping the later Assyrian and Babylonian cultures. Despite this shared heritage, Babylonia, unlike the militarily powerful Assyria, was often founded and ruled by non-native peoples, such as the Amorites, Kassites, Arameans, and Chaldeans, as well as by its more powerful Assyrian neighbors, making its cultural tapestry a truly complex and multicultural weave. We have traversed the heartlands of the Near East, from the Hittite kingdoms of Anatolia to the majestic dynasties of Egypt, the enigmatic civilizations of the Iranian plateau, and the bustling city-states of Mesopotamia. We've witnessed the rise of writing, the construction of monumental architecture, the ebb and flow of empires, all under the pervasive influence of bronze. In our next segment, we will venture even further, journeying across continents, tracing the mysterious spread of bronze technology and exploring the hidden cultures it birthed, from the vast steppes of Central Asia to the ancient river valleys of China and the enigmatic islands of Japan and Korea. The echoes of bronze resonated far beyond the Near East, shaping lives and societies in ways that continue to fascinate and challenge our understanding of the ancient world. So, for now, let these tales of pharaohs, kings, and ancient empires settle in your mind, like the sands of time. Rest easy or continue your tasks, knowing that the story of bronze is far from over. I'm vibing history, and I'll be back to continue our journey. In our last journey through the annals of time, we unearth the very essence of the Bronze Age, that transformative era when humanity first truly mastered metal. We saw how the simple act of blending copper with tin or arsenic forged an alloy, a bronze, that was harder, sharper, and far more durable than anything that came before it. This wasn't just a technological leap. It was a societal earthquake, reshaping everything from tools and weapons to the very fabric of early civilization. But the story of bronze isn't just about its invention in one isolated corner of the world. No, the real magic, the real mystery, lies in how this revolutionary material, this harbinger of empires, spread its metallic tendrils across continents. How did the knowledge of its creation, its secrets, travel from the bustling river valleys of the Near East to the misty shores of Britain, from the arid plains of Central Asia to the lush deltas of Southeast Asia? This is where our journey takes an even more fascinating turn. We're going to trace the echoes across continents, following the whispers of metallurgical innovation and the unseen currents of ancient trade. We'll explore the myriad cultures that embrace bronze, not always in the same way, not always for the same reasons, and often with their own unique adaptations. Prepare yourselves for a deep dive into the mysterious diffusion of a technology that quite literally changed the world. Now, it's important to remember that the Bronze Age didn't arrive everywhere with a grand, synchronized fanfare. Like a slowly unfolding dawn, it illuminated different regions at different times, sometimes with blazing speed, sometimes with a more gradual, almost hesitant glow. Think of it less as a single, uniform global era, and more as a series of interconnected, yet independently evolving stories. For many societies, especially those fortunate enough to be near copper deposits, the journey began with a transitional period, the Chalcolithic or Copperstone Age. This was a time when our ancestors dabbled with pure copper, often cold hammering it into rudimentary tools. But copper, while a step up from stone, was still relatively soft. It bent, it dulled, it broke. The real game changer was the discovery that adding a small percentage of tin, or even arsenic, to molten copper created something far superior: bronze. This wasn't an easy discovery. Tin, unlike ubiquitous copper, is a relatively rare commodity, found only in specific geological pockets. This scarcity meant that for many societies, bronze remained a precious and expensive material, often reserved for elite weaponry, intricate art, or religious artifacts. Imagine the awe, the power, imbued in a bronze sword when most people still relied on stone tools for their daily lives. These were the objects of kings, of priests, of the mightiest warriors. And because it was so valuable, bronze was also keenly recycled, melted down, and reformed, leaving us with fewer direct traces than one might expect for such a pivotal material. But the appeal of bronze was undeniable. It offered a technological advantage that was simply unmatched. While iron, far more abundant in the Earth's crust, would eventually succeed bronze, its time had not yet come. Iron smelting required temperatures far exceeding those achievable by Neolithic pottery kilns, temperatures of over 1200 degrees Celsius. Copper, with its more modest melting point, and tin, a true lightweight at just 232 degrees Celsius, were perfectly within the capabilities of those ancient kilns. So, how did this innovation spread? The evidence suggests multiple points of origin, like ripples in a vast ancient pond. The Makop culture in the North Caucasus, for instance, appears to have independently discovered arsenical bronze as early as the mid-4th millennium BC, making them some of the oldest known bronze producers. But tin bronze, the more common and eventually dominant form, required a more sophisticated, systematic approach, mining the tin or smelting it separately, and then precisely adding it to molten copper. This was not a simple feat, but a testament to growing metallurgical sophistication. The Near East, the cradle of so many foundational innovations, was, of course, among the very first regions to fully embrace the Bronze Age. We're talking about the rise of Mesopotamian civilizations like Sumer, where intensive year-round agriculture supported burgeoning urban centers. Here, the Bronze Age wasn't just about metal. It was about the very infrastructure of civilization itself. The invention of writing systems like cuneiform and hieroglyphs, the potter's wheel, centralized governments led by hereditary monarchs, written law codes, and sophisticated architectural projects. This was an explosion of societal complexity, all intertwined with the emerging power of bronze. In this region, archaeologists meticulously divide the Bronze Age into distinct periods. The Early Bronze Age, from roughly 3300 to 2100 BC. The Middle Bronze Age, from 2100 to 1550 BC. And the Late Bronze Age, from 1550 to 1200 BC, culminating in what we will explore later as the terrifying Bronze Age collapse. Each period saw shifts in power, the rise and fall of empires, and a constant reshaping of the geopolitical landscape. Consider Anatolia, the land bridge between East and West. Here, the Hittite Empire rose in the 18th century BC, establishing its formidable presence in Hattusa. At its zenith, this kingdom controlled vast swathes of central Anatolia, stretching into Syria and Mesopotamia. They were a power to be reckoned with, their strength undoubtedly bolstered by their mastery of bronze. Yet, even mighty empires eventually yield. After 1180 BC, amidst a widespread regional upheaval often linked to the enigmatic Sea Peoples, the Hittite kingdom splintered into smaller Neo-Hittite city-states, a testament to the fragility of even bronze-forged power. And then there is Egypt, the enduring icon of ancient grandeur. For the Egyptians, the Bronze Age began in their proto-dynastic period around 3150 BC. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, around 3100 BC, marked the true beginning of their early dynastic period, setting the stage for the unparalleled splendor of the Old Kingdom. This was the era of the pyramids, of monumental art, and of a civilization that reached its first peak of complexity. Memphis, in the early Bronze Age, was quite simply the largest city of its time, a testament to the organizational power that bronze tools and technologies helped facilitate. Even during periods of turmoil, like the First Intermediate Period, when Egypt was fragmented between competing powers in Lower and Upper Egypt, the echoes of bronze continued. It was a dynamic time, eventually leading to reunification under the Theban kings, showcasing the enduring resilience of Egyptian civilization. Further south, in Nubia, the Bronze Age also took root, starting around 2300 BC. The Egyptians, ever keen on resources, introduced copper smelting to the Nubian city of Meroe, and the discovery of a furnace for bronze casting in Kerma, dated to between 2300 and 1900 BC, confirms the local adoption of this critical technology. The Middle Kingdom of Egypt, from 2055 to 1650 BC, saw the rise of the Osiris funerary cult, deeply intertwined with the daily lives of Egyptians. And during the Second Intermediate Period, when Egypt once again experienced internal strife, we encounter the Hyksos, a people whose reign profoundly impacted the Nile Delta before they were eventually expelled, leading into the Golden Age of the New Kingdom. This era, from the 16th to the 11th centuries BC, was Egypt's most prosperous, its peak of imperial power, the time of the Ramesside pharaohs whose names still resonate across millennia. But the story of bronze extends far beyond the Nile and the Fertile Crescent. Journey eastward to the Iranian plateau, and we encounter Elam, a civilization that existed east of Mesopotamia. In its Middle Bronze Age, Elam was characterized by kingdoms centered in Anshan, eventually shifting its focus to Susa in the Khazestan lowlands. Elamite culture, a vibrant tapestry of influences, played a pivotal role in shaping later empires, even the Achaemenid dynasty. Further into Central Asia, we find the fascinating Oxus civilization, also known as the Bactrian-Marjana archaeological complex, flourishing from around 2300 to 1700 BC. Centered on the upper Amu Darya River, this culture developed a sophisticated proto-urban society in its early stages, exemplified by sites like Alton Deep. These were agro-pastoralists, skillfully navigating the delicate balance between farming and herding, and critically, developing complex east-west trade routes. It was through these routes that wheat and barley made their way to China, and millet traveled westward into Central Asia, a testament to the interconnectedness of these ancient worlds. The BMAC, as it's often abbreviated, had close international relations with the Indus Valley, the Iranian Plateau, and even, indirectly, with Mesopotamia. All these civilizations were adept in lost wax casting, a highly advanced metallurgical technique, demonstrating a shared pool of technological knowledge, perhaps indicating direct contact or, at the very least, rapid diffusion of techniques. Now, let's pivot dramatically eastward, across the vast steppes and mountains, to East Asia, specifically China. Here, the earliest bronze artifacts were found at the Majiayo culture site, dating back to 3100 to 2700 BC. However, the application of the term Bronze Age to China is a bit more nuanced. While some scholars align it with the Shang dynasty, from the 16th to 11th centuries BC, and the subsequent Zhou dynasty, the truth is that bronze never truly ended in China in the same way it did in the West. Iron use, though present, remained minimal for centuries, and bronze continued to hold a paramount position, especially for ritual art. Chinese bronze metallurgy, exemplified by the magnificent Erlitou period artifacts, represents one of the earliest large-scale metal industries in the Central Plains. The debate continues whether this technology arose independently in China or was influenced by outside contact. The discovery of Europoid Darim mummies in Xinjiang has led some archaeologists to suggest a possible transmission route from the West. The idea is that bronze and iron technology, along with wheeled wagons and horse domestication, may have traveled from west to east, providing external impetus for the rise of civilizations like the Shang and Zhou. The production of elaborate Chinese ritual bronzes, particularly the massive sacrificial tripods known as dings, stand as a testament to their metallurgical prowess and cultural significance. These bronzes are often adorned with the enigmatic Taotai motif, stylized animal faces, and bear cast inscriptions, a priceless trove of early Chinese writing that helps historians reconstruct the history of this ancient land. These inscriptions, often detailing historical events, gifts, and dedications, provide a permanence to the past that few other mediums can match. Moving further into East Asia, to the Japanese archipelago, bronze was introduced during the early Yayoi period, around 300 BC. This era saw the arrival of metalworking and agricultural practices brought by settlers from the continent, likely via the Korean peninsula and mainland China. In Japan, iron was primarily for tools, while bronze retained its elevated status for ritual and ceremonial artifacts. The Korean peninsula itself saw the Bronze Age begin around 1000 to 800 BC. Initially centered around Liaoning and southern Manchuria, Korean Bronze Age culture developed unique typologies and styles, particularly in its ritual objects. The Mumin pottery period, known for its undecorated vessels, also marks the origins of intensive agriculture and complex societies in the region. Bronze daggers, exchanged across the peninsula, conferred prestige and authority, often buried with high-status individuals in elaborate megalithic burials. Journeying south to the Indian subcontinent, the Bronze Age began around 3300 BC with a majestic Indus Valley civilization. The Harappans, as they are known, were masters of metallurgy, producing copper, bronze, lead, and tin. Their cities, with their sophisticated urban planning, elaborate drainage systems, and massive non-residential buildings, were home to tens of thousands of people, perhaps even millions across the entire civilization. The Indus Valley civilization provides compelling evidence of long-distance trade, with their artifacts found as far away as Mesopotamia and Egypt, clearly indicating that these civilizations were not only in contact, but actively exchanging goods. And then, down into Southeast Asia, particularly Thailand, where bronze artifacts dating back to 2100 BC have been found at sites like Ban Chang. This discovery, along with evidence of on-site casting, suggests that bronze technology was either introduced from elsewhere or independently developed with great sophistication. However, unlike in other regions, the advent of metallurgy in Southeast Asia, particularly in sites like Ban Lum Khao and Ban Na Di, doesn't seem to have been as significant a catalyst for social stratification or warfare. Instead, social structures appear to have remained more hierarchical, perhaps indicating a different cultural integration of this new technology. In Vietnam, the magnificent Dong sun drums, dating back to the Neolithic, are powerful testaments to the early use of bronze, particularly in the Red River Delta regions. These drums, intricate and symbolic, relate to the unique Dong sun culture of Vietnam. Interestingly, archaeological research in northern Vietnam suggests a rise in infectious diseases following the advent of metallurgy, possibly due to increased population density, land clearing, and changes in diet. Now, let's turn our attention to Europe, a continent where bronze also wove its transformative magic. In Southeast Europe, a truly surprising discovery reshaped our understanding of bronze's origins. In 2013, researchers reported finding a tin bronze foil at the Plachnik archaeological site in Serbia, dated to around 4650 BC, along with other artifacts from Serbia and Bulgaria, predating 4000 BC. This evidence suggests that early tin bronze was far more common and developed independently in Europe a staggering 1,500 years before the first tin-bronze alloys in the Near East. The production of complex tin bronzes in the Balkans lasted for about 500 years before seemingly disappearing, only to be reintroduced much later. This region also boasts some of the oldest golden artifacts in the world, found in the necropolis of Varna, dating between 4600 to 4200 BC. And the Debine treasure in central Bulgaria, with its 20,000 gold jewelry items, including a rare gold and platinum dagger, speaks to a major craft center that exported its golden creations across Europe in the late 3rd millennium BC. Moving into the Aegean, the Bronze Age truly began around 3200 BC. This was where the Minoan civilization, centered in Knossos on Crete, established a far-ranging trade network. They imported tin and charcoal to Cyprus, where abundant copper was mined and then alloyed into bronze. These bronze objects were then exported far and wide, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of navigation and trade routes, a level of skill that wouldn't be surpassed until much later in history. The Minoans, like all great trading empires, valued luxury goods, which ironically sometimes led to famines when staple food supplies were neglected. The very success of their trade network made them vulnerable. And here, in the Aegean, we begin to see the first foreshadowings of the Great Bronze Age collapse, a topic we will delve into deeply in our next segment. Theories abound. The decline of Minoan power, replaced by Mycenaean primacy, leading to the collapse of the trade network, famines and pestilence devastating client states, even the exhaustion of Cypriot forests due to charcoal production for bronze manufacturing. The dramatic Thera eruption, around 1600 BC, an event that unleashed a colossal tsunami, certainly played a role in destabilizing the region, though its precise impact on the final collapse remains debated. In Central Europe, the early Bronze Age saw the rise of the Unnetis culture from 2300 to 1600 BC. Rich burials, like the one at Lübingen with its gold grave gifts, indicate a growing social stratification. This was followed by the Middle Bronze Age tumulus culture, characterized by burials in barrows, and then the Late Bronze Age urnfield culture, where cremation burials became the norm. These cultures, though distinct, were all part of a dynamic Central European landscape, evolving and interacting. Southern Europe also embraced bronze. In central and southern Italy, the Apennine culture thrived. In Sardinia and Corsica, the remarkable Nuragic civilization flourished from the 18th century BC to the 2nd century AD, building their iconic, enigmatic Nuragic towers, the largest and best-preserved megalithic remains in Europe. These towers, whose purpose is still debated, stand as silent sentinels to a complex Bronze Age society. The Terramare culture in northern Italy, an early Indo-European civilization, built square villages of wooden stilt houses, often near streams, with a grid plan. These were fortified settlements, testament to a developing, organized society in the Middle and Late Bronze Age. And finally, to Western Europe. Great Britain's Bronze Age began around 2100 to 750 BC. Here, migration played a significant role, with new peoples arriving from the continent, some from as far as present-day Switzerland, bringing new behaviors and cultural changes. The rich Wessex culture developed in southern Britain, while the climate, once warm and dry, became wetter, forcing populations into fertile valleys. Large livestock farms emerged, contributing to economic growth and further forest clearances. Devon and Cornwall, with their rich tin deposits, became major sources for much of Western Europe, and copper was extensively mined in places like the Great Ore Mine in northern Wales. Social groups became increasingly complex, with clear hierarchies emerging, a reflection of the power and wealth that bronze could generate. Individual burials, in contrast to the communal Neolithic practices, became the norm, with people interred in individual barrows or cists, reflecting a shift in social structures. The sheer quantity of bronze objects discovered, like the immense 6,500-piece Alham hoard in East Cambridgeshire, speaks to the scale of metal production and the importance of bronze in daily life. The Atlantic Bronze Age, a cultural complex spanning the Atlantic Iberian Peninsula, France, Britain, and Ireland from around 2100 to 700 BC, was characterized by extensive economic and cultural exchange, with trade extending as far as Denmark and the Mediterranean. This was a network unified by regular maritime exchange, showcasing the ingenuity of ancient mariners. In Ireland, the Bronze Age began around 2000 BC, marked by the manufacturing of ballybeg-type flat axes. The country is known for its numerous early Bronze Age burials and the construction of impressive stone circles and stone rows during this period, echoing traditions we see across much of Europe. And in Northern Europe, the Bronze Age, though relatively late, from around 1700 to 500 BC, presents a fascinating picture. While bronze and gold were largely imported from Central Europe, the cultures here developed unique expressions, with numerous rock carvings depicting ships, suggesting the critical role of seafaring. The lack of written language means we interpret their world through these vivid carvings and the remarkably well-preserved artifacts made of wool and wood. Finally, Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. The Yamnaya culture from 3300 to 2600 BC, an early Bronze Age culture of the Pontic-Caspian steppe, is associated with early Indo-Europeans. This was followed by the Catacomb and Poltavka cultures. Further north, the Corded-ware culture spread eastward, eventually developing into the Abashevo and Sintashta cultures, where the earliest known chariots have been found in burials, a truly revolutionary innovation in warfare and transportation. In returning to the Caucasus, the Maykop culture, with its arsenical bronze artifacts from the 4th millennium BC, stands as a testament to independent innovation, influencing the circulation of arsenical bronze technology across southern and eastern Europe. The story of bronze, then, is not one of a single point of origin, but a testament to human ingenuity arising in multiple places and then spreading through complex webs of trade, migration, and cultural exchange. From the river valleys of the Near East to the steppes of Central Asia, from the vibrant cultures of China to the ancient mariners of the Atlantic, bronze forged a new world. It connected distant lands, stimulated innovation, and laid the foundations for the empires that would dominate the ancient world. But this era of unprecedented connectivity and technological advancement was not destined to last forever. The very interdependencies that fueled the Bronze Age also created vulnerabilities. And as we will explore in our next, and perhaps most unsettling chapter, the glittering age of bronze would eventually give way to a terrifying silence, a widespread collapse that would plunge much of the ancient world into centuries of darkness. Prepare yourselves, for the story of how this happened is one of the most enigmatic and disturbing chapters in all of human history. Deep, calm, professional voice. Now, we journey to the end of an era, a twilight falling upon the flourishing civilizations built on the gleam of bronze. We've seen how this remarkable alloy forged empires, connected distant lands, and spurred unprecedented advancements. But as with all things, even the mightiest ages must yield. And in our final segment, we confront one of history's most perplexing and terrifying mysteries, the Great Bronze Age collapse. Imagine a world not so different from our own in its interconnectedness, a vast web of trade routes stretching from the Aegean to Mesopotamia, from Egypt to the distant Indus Valley. Empires like the Hittites, the Egyptians of the New Kingdom, and the Mycenaean Greeks stood as titans, their power cemented by sophisticated bronze weaponry and the wealth generated from this intricate global economy. Cities hummed with life, a vibrant tapestry of merchants, artisans, and rulers. Then, around the period of 1200 BCE, this complex system began to unravel. Not with a bang, but with a terrifying silence, a widespread and synchronous collapse that swept across the eastern Mediterranean, the Near East, and parts of Europe, leaving devastation and desolation in its wake. It was as if a cosmic switch had been flipped, plunging a once thriving world into a profound darkness. What could possibly bring down such a monumental structure? What forces were so potent that they could dismantle an entire interconnected civilization, leading to the abandonment of cities, the disruption of trade, the loss of literacy in many regions, and a precipitous decline in population? This isn't just about one empire falling. It's about a cascade, a domino effect that sent ripples of destruction across thousands of miles. The archaeological record from this period is stark and often brutally clear. Major urban centers were suddenly destroyed, many showing signs of violent attack and widespread fires. Take, for instance, the legendary city of Ugarit, a crucial trading hub on the Syrian coast. It flourished for centuries, a cosmopolitan center exchanging goods with Egypt, Cyprus, and the Hittites. But around 1185 BCE, Ugarit was annihilated. Its palace, its temples, its houses, all burned to the ground. Clay tablets found in the ruins speak of desperate appeals for help, of invaders approaching by sea. Then silence. Similar stories echo from across the region. Hattusa, the mighty capital of the Hittite Empire, fell and was never reoccupied. Mycenaean palaces in Greece, once bastions of wealth and power, met a similar fiery end. In Egypt, while the New Kingdom survived, it was significantly weakened, constantly battling new threats and struggling to maintain its former glory. The vibrant interconnectedness that defined the late Bronze Age fractured, replaced by isolated communities and a profound sense of loss. But what caused this widespread cataclysm? Historians and archaeologists have wrestled with this question for decades, and the answer remains elusive, debated, and likely multifaceted. No single smoking gun has emerged, no singular event that can fully explain the scale of the destruction. Instead, we are left to piece together a complex puzzle from fragments of evidence, hypothesizing a confluence of factors that, together, prove too much for these once resilient societies to bear. One of the most compelling and frequently cited culprits is the mysterious group known as the Sea Peoples. These enigmatic raiders are mentioned in Egyptian inscriptions, depicted as foreign invaders who swept across the eastern Mediterranean, attacking coastal cities and challenging the might of the Pharaohs. Reliefs show them with distinctive horn helmets and round shields, their ships filled with warriors. Pharaoh Ramesses III famously claimed to have defeated them in a great land and sea battle, but even his victory narrative hints at the immense strain they placed on Egypt. But who were these Sea Peoples? Were they a unified force, a marauding alliance of different tribes seeking plunder in new lands? Or were they disparate groups, displaced by other crises, desperate and opportunistic, seeking survival in a world that was already crumbling around them? Their origins remain largely unknown, their motivation speculative. Some theories suggest they were Mycenaeans fleeing internal strife. Others point to Anatolian peoples displaced by drought or conflict. Regardless of their identity, their appearance coincides perfectly with the wave of destruction that marks the end of the Late Bronze Age. They may have been the final, brutal blow to an already teetering structure. Beyond the specter of these mysterious invaders, other theories point to internal weaknesses that made these civilizations vulnerable. Climate change, for instance, is a strong contender. Evidence from ice cores and tree rings suggests a period of prolonged drought around 1200 BCE, particularly in the Near East and the Aegean. Imagine the impact of such a drought on societies dependent on intensive agriculture and intricate irrigation systems. Crop failures would lead to famine, driving populations from their lands, creating refugees and social unrest. This internal instability could have weakened central authorities, making them ripe for collapse from within or easy prey for outside aggressors. Then there's the economic aspect, the very foundation of the Bronze Age's success: trade. The intricate network that brought tin from distant mines to copper-rich regions was vital. If any part of this network faltered, the production of bronze, the lifeblood of their military and elite culture, would cease. Perhaps a disruption in tin supplies, due to conflict, piracy, or the collapse of intermediary trading partners, led to a bronze shortage. This would have crippled armies, rendered tools useless, and undermined the very technological advantage that defined the era. The shift towards iron, a more abundant but harder-to-work metal, certainly accelerated after the collapse, suggesting a desperate search for alternatives. Another possibility involved internal social unrest and class divisions. The Bronze Age empires were often hierarchical, with a small elite controlling vast wealth and power. Perhaps a growing resentment among the populace, exacerbated by famine or political instability, led to revolts and civil strife. We see hints of this in some texts, though direct evidence is scarce. A weakening central authority, unable to maintain order or provide for its people, could easily crumble. Even natural disasters played their part. While the devastating eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE predates the main collapse, it certainly introduced a period of significant environmental and political upheaval in the Aegean, contributing to a prolonged instability that some argue set the stage for later collapse. Earthquakes, frequent in the region, could have also delivered crippling blows to cities already under strain. The terrifying silence of the Bronze Age collapse is not just about the disappearance of great empires. It's about the profound loss of knowledge, the disruption of cultural transmission. Literacy declined, and many of the sophisticated administrative systems simply vanished. It was a dark age, a period of regression, from which new societies would eventually emerge, slowly piecing together a new world, often on the ruins of the old. What we learn from this cataclysm is not just a tale of destruction, but a cautionary one about the fragility of complex systems. When societies become deeply interconnected, their strengths also become their weaknesses. A shock in one part of the network can reverberate across the entire system, leading to a cascade of failures. The Great Bronze Age collapse reminds us that even the most advanced and seemingly stable civilizations are susceptible to the combined forces of environmental change, economic disruption, internal strife, and external threats. It's a testament to the fact that history doesn't always move in a linear progression, and that even the grandest ages can end in a terrifying, echoing silence. And with that, our journey through the Bronze Age draws to a close. From the forging of power to the sands of time, the echoes across continents, and finally, to this terrifying silence, we've explored a period of incredible human ingenuity and ambition. I hope this exploration has given you a deeper appreciation for the complex tapestry of our ancient past, and perhaps a new lens through which to view the challenges and triumphs of our own interconnected world. And so, our journey through the Bronze Age concludes for tonight. From the fiery crucibles where raw or became the metal of kings, to the bustling cities, the mighty empires, and the enigmatic collapse that reshaped the world. It truly was an era unlike any other. I hope you found this exploration as captivating as I did. What were your favorite revelations from this ancient chapter? Do you have a theory on the collapse? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, keep exploring the past.